Welcome. You're officially locked into Persuasions of Comfort. I'm your host, Naum. I want to give a big shout out to all the listeners out there who've been tuning in since day one. The love and support is 100% greatly appreciated. Let's get it. So my last episode closed out a series I titled Becoming by Design. This series, first episode, is about flow state. The premise of the series explores what happens when you stop forcing creativity, productivity, alignment, healing, clarity, even purpose, and instead create the conditions for them to meet you. The core idea or takeaways from this series is that flow is not something you chase. Flow state is something that you prepare for, you surrender into, and of course recognize when it arrives. The series is for listeners who feel like they're doing all the right things, right? You're planning, you're building, you're striving, you're healing, you're working, you're praying, journaling, even optimizing your time the best way that you can, but still feel disconnected from ease. I want to invite everyone to examine some of the key differences between discipline and force, ambition versus anxiety, movement and alignment. Keep this question in mind as we go through the series. What happens when you stop trying to manufacture your best self and start creating the conditions for your most aligned self to emerge? So in this episode 1 of the series, I want to focus on this core theme here. In this theme, I'm introducing the tension between wanting to feel aligned and accidentally pressuring yourself into performance. I want to explore how the pursuit of flow can feel like another form of control. So here's the core message that I came up with. Sometimes we're not blocked because we lack discipline. Sometimes we're blocked because we're trying to force ease through pressure. A lot of my episodes focus on routine, discipline, and motivation. But now I want to take it a little bit further. Have you ever wanted to feel inspired so badly that you started pressuring yourself to get there? You sit down to create, to work, to pray. You're planning, you're building, or you're making a decision. And instead of finding clarity, you feel a little bit more tense. So you start telling yourself, I should be in flow state by now. I should know what I'm doing by now. I should feel more motivated by now. But what if the pressure that you're trying so hard to tap into, this flow state, is the very thing that's blocking it from actually emerging? So today, let's talk about what happens when you stop chasing flow state and let it come to you. So point number 1. Flow state is not a prize for overworking. Sometimes I catch myself treating flow state like an award or a reward for productivity. If I push myself hard enough, if I'm organized and I plan enough, I optimize my time enough, then eventually I will access that clear, effortless place where everything finally clicks. And on the surface, that sounds productive, right? It sounds responsible, disciplined. But the truth is, flow doesn't respond well to force. It needs presence, safety, space, and trust. When your nervous system is under pressure, Your mind still performs, but your spirit may not feel connected to what you're doing. And that's where a lot of us get stuck. You may currently be in a space where you feel like, man, I'm here for a reason. So you convince yourself to stay. You tell yourself, maybe I just need to try one more time. I need to try harder. Just one more chance. Maybe I'm not supposed to quit. See, there's a good side to that. The pro is you start to build endurance. You develop the ability to try one more time. You strengthen your spirit of encouragement and determination. You move further away from the temptation of giving up too early because things get hard. That's the kind of commitment that actually really matters. See, I know this because sometimes the breakthrough really does come after that one last attempt. Sometimes staying the course teaches you something that leaving too soon never could. But there's a downside. Determination to stay, the stubbornness to not change, can happen if you're not careful. You can become so focused on staying where you are at that you lose vision to see opportunities when they appear. You miss that moment to pivot direction while you still can maintain and keep that same momentum. If you're not able to realize that, there are tools around you that can help you within the space that has you feeling vulnerable. That is a problem. And sometimes when we decide too late to make that change, you miss the train that could have taken you a little bit further with fewer stops. So the question now becomes, how do you find the balance? I believe the first step is learning how to find a moment of stillness in the middle of chaos. Because change is the only constant in life. And if you are constantly forcing flow state, it becomes harder to recognize discipline required to start living on purpose. You start confusing pressure with purpose. You may start to confuse that staying in the same space is the same thing as strength. You start to confuse movement and alignment. I've probably said this so many times in my other episodes. One of my favorite quotes: do not confuse movement with progress, because you could be running in place and going nowhere. So when you pause, even briefly, you give yourself room to ask the right questions. Am I still here because it feels aligned? Or am I still here because I'm afraid to shift? And that's where the pros and cons kind of tie in together. Persistence teaches you not to give up too soon. Stillness teaches you not to stay for too long. If you're having a bad day, all right, cool, have your bad day. But don't be moping around for weeks. That makes no sense. You need both. That is the crossroad that we come up to. You can either choose the path of prosperity or choose the path of feeling sorry for yourself. And the biggest key here is that if you're living in your purpose, no matter where you are at in the world, whatever obstacle surfaces, flow state will naturally find you in your moment of stillness. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are finally present enough to receive what's next. So here's the strongest anchor that I can put on this point here. You need both. When you're at that crossroad, just remember, Persistence teaches you not to give up too soon, but stillness teaches you not to stay too long. Now, point number 2. Chasing flow can become control in disguise. Sometimes the chase sounds responsible. I'm sure we've all heard the saying or the term organized chaos. And honestly, sometimes it's exactly what our lives feel like. Sometimes it's exactly what's needed. Because we're moving, we're planning, we're trying new things. We're actually showing up, and we are doing all the things. From the outside looking in, it may look like discipline. It may look like ambition, and we all love ambitious individuals. It may look like focus. But have you ever caught yourself or someone saying, I'm just trying to be consistent, man. Listen, I'm just trying to focus. Or my favorite, I'm just trying to make things shake. I'm trying to make something happen. And to be clear, there's nothing wrong with consistency. Absolutely nothing wrong with being focused. And clearly, there's nothing wrong with making things shake and making things happen. Because the upside to this is the type of mindset that will help you build structure. It can help you stop waiting for the perfect moment. It can teach you how to show up even when you do not feel fully ready. It can create the momentum when your emotions are all over the place. And trust me, that matters. Because sometimes when you need to keep going, which is the space that we may all feel, I feel like that right now. Sometimes you need to stay focused. So you might cut people off and you might dial in. You're locked in. Sometimes you need a reminder. You need to remind yourself that progress doesn't always feel exciting in the beginning. Patience and planning. That's how my first 6 months is like. But here's the downside of that. Sometimes what we call consistency is actually control. Sometimes what we call focus is actually fear. Sometimes what we call making things shake, making things happen, is really us trying to outrun the possibilities that things may not happen the way that we imagined. Right? Let's be real here. So we have to pause and ask ourselves, what is underneath the chase? What is the motivation behind the things that you're doing? A lot of times underneath that chase that we're looking for is fear. So what is fear? I describe fear as false evidence appearing real. And when we are chasing flow, chasing success, clarity, or chasing the next version of ourselves, we have to be honest about what type of fear that might be driving us. So let's say it's the fear of falling behind. Okay, let's fact check that. Are you actually falling behind, or are you comparing your success to someone else's timeline? Are you measuring your progress against where you started, or are you measuring your worth against someone else's current status? Be aware of comparison, because comparison can make you feel late to a life you were never assigned to live. Then there's fear of not being chosen. And I get it. We want what we want. We want the opportunity, the relationship, the role, the platform, the breakthrough, the recognition. We want that yes, not that no. But let's fact check that too. What if you've already been chosen, just not in the fashion that satisfies your current definition of happiness? What if that door that opened doesn't look like the door you imagine, but it is still connected to your purpose? Sometimes we're so attached to a version of being chosen in the way that we want to be chosen that we miss the ways life is already making room for us. Then there's the fear of missing out, FOMO, classic FOMO. Maybe it is simply just not your turn. Plain and simple. You may be in a season where you are required to stay low, stay ready, and keep firing from the sideline. You cannot always be in the game. If you're trying to force yourself into every single play, every single movement, every opportunity, you're trying to be in every single room, you will burn yourself out before your actual assignment begins. Rest is not always a sign of rejection. Waiting is not always weakness. Patience is a virtue. Being unseen is not the same as being unprepared. Then there's the fear of failure. This is the fear of not living up to your own expectations, or someone else's expectations for the matter of fact. The fear of not becoming who you said that you would become within the time frame that you said that you would. And now that I think about it, this is a heavy one because sometimes we're not just chasing a goal. We are chasing an identity. We're trying to prove that the vision was real. We're trying to prove that the version of ourselves that we see in the future can actually happen. We want to prove to ourselves that our dreams still matter, that we didn't waste time, that we're not behind, that we are capable, that we are chosen. What if I told you that if you are building from fear, even progress can feel exhausting? And finally, we have the fear of success. I kept this one for last because I feel like this one could be the hardest to admit. Because new territory can feel scary. Comfort is familiar. The same routines, the same relationships, the same mindset, that same version of yourself that you're so comfortable with may not be fulfilling, but at least you know what you're going to get. It's known. So why step out into something new? Why evolve into a better version of yourself when staying the same feels easier? Why risk the unknown when the familiar asks you less questions? It does not produce doubt or anxiety. But if you are married to comfort and familiarity, you will naturally find yourself fighting against the current. Why? I'm glad you asked. Because change is constant. So my question to you is, why are you fighting against the very thing life keeps using to help you grow? And this is where the pros and cons tie in together. The pro of chasing is that it can create movement. The downside of chasing is that it can disconnect you from peace. We all need peace. The benefit of consistency is that it builds discipline. Now, the downside is that discipline built from desperation is harder to maintain. Because there's a difference between discipline created from fear and discipline created from willingness. Discipline from fear says something like, I should, or I have to become this, or I'm not enough. Discipline from willingness might say something like, I want to become 1% better every day because I am worth the growth. One is rooted in pressure, the other is rooted in purpose. And that is why flow state doesn't come from constantly chasing and forcing and proving or even controlling. Flow state comes when your discipline has room to breathe. It comes when you can still be consistent without being consumed, focused without being fearful, ambitious without being anxious, committed without being controlled by the outcome. Because the goal is not just to make something happen. You're not just out here trying to make things shake. The goal is to become healthy enough, grounded enough, and present enough to recognize what is really happening for you, through you, and around you. A strong anchor to tie up this point. The pro of chasing is that it can create movement. The con of chasing is that it can disconnect you from peace. All right, let's jump into point number 3. Flow comes when conditions are right, not when the moment is perfect. You cannot demand flow, but you can create the conditions for it. So you're probably asking me, what does that actually mean? Well, it means if you have a vision for your future, naturally you're going to want to prepare for it in the best way you know how. For example, you may have a vision of financial freedom, but we know financial freedom isn't going to happen because you snap your fingers. It is connected to your relationship with money, your understanding of compound investing, your spending habits, your discipline, and your willingness to make different decisions over a period of time. The vision may be the destination, but the preparation is the road you build to get there. And preparation could look different depending on the season that you're in, or maybe just the point of view. Sometimes preparation looks like rest because you have an 8-hour drive ahead of you. Preparation could look like repetition because you have a webinar, a competition, or maybe a presentation coming up. Preparation could be silence because you are actively seeking peace, or you simply need a moment to think. Preparation could look like honesty because the people around you in your circle may not trust you as far as they can throw you. Or maybe there's someone in your circle that you don't trust. And you have to be honest about who has access to your energy. Perhaps preparation looks like putting your phone down so you can stop doom scrolling, limit your social media access, and create healthier relationships with your attention. Sometimes preparation looks like starting without demanding that first attempt to be perfect. Or better yet, starting without waiting for external permissions to tap into that passion project. Because we know it's been calling your name for years. These are what I call the benefits of preparation. Preparation gives your vision somewhere to land. It makes you more available. It helps you build trust with yourself. Preparation gives your gifts and talents structure. It reminds you that purpose still requires preparation. But there's also a downside to preparation that might turn into pressure. Sometimes we hide behind preparation because we're afraid to begin. 6 months ago, you started planning. 6 months later, you still planning. We keep researching. We keep editing. We keep waiting for that perfect moment. We keep telling ourselves that we're getting ready, when really you are simply delaying the moment where you could have trust in yourself and then just jump in. That is when preparation stops helping the flow and starts blocking it. Because flow state often arrives after you stop trying to prove that you deserve it. What's meant for you will be for you. the harder we try to convince ourselves and other people that we are entitled to something, the more we may find ourselves pushing further away from it. And truthfully, some things do not arrive through force. Some things arrive through readiness, humility, surrender. When things arrive, you finally stop trying to control how they show up. Okay, story time. Truth be told, this is my 6th year in my podcast journey. And I'm not nearly as close as where I thought I would be. Sometimes I feel like my cadence is off. My scheduling is all over the place. There's been moments where I sit down with the intention to create something powerful and I get nothing. I try to pull off something incredible, and instead of feeling inspired, it feels like I'm creating more distance between the thing that I truly enjoy doing. I never wanted to feel obligated to do my podcast, but the more I tried to force myself to create and publish, the harder it became to do it. I didn't like that feeling at all, because this podcast was never supposed to feel like punishment. Like I gotta get this done. Another box to check off my list. It was never supposed to feel like something I had to drag myself towards. All right, so a month goes by, and randomly I go on this leisurely stroll in nature. Or I find myself posted up at my favorite sunset spot, showering after a long day of yard work, meditating, doing yoga, having meaningful conversations with a friend or a stranger, pulling up to random events and showing love. And suddenly, the sparks begin to fly. A topic will come to me. A sentence will find me. A connection will click. A reflection will rise up naturally. Not because I forced it, but because I finally gave it room to emerge. And truth be told, that's one of the things I truly appreciate about my episodes. They don't just reflect random ideas. They reflect experiences that I'm either currently navigating or have already navigated. They are rooted in real life scenarios. And because of that, they become topics that other people can relate to as well. That reminds me of something I read regarding abundance. Abundance can be described as your needs are being met and your desires spontaneously fulfilled. I understand flow state in a similar way. Flow happens when your passions are connected to your natural God-given talents, skills, and those gifts are being used to help you live out your purpose. It was never about forcing the moment. It is about creating enough room for the moment to meet you wherever you're at. This is where the pros and cons tie in together for this point. Preparation helps you become ready for what you say that you want. Surrender helps you receive what you could not have planned. You need both. Because if you only prepare, you may try to control everything. If you only surrender, you'll never be built for the next level. You may never have the opportunity to build the structure needed to hold what is coming next. See, flow requires both responsibility and release. I look at it like this. I show up, I practice, I rest, and I'm honest with myself. Where am I at in this current moment? How do I feel? What is my spirit like? What is my mental, physically, emotionally, etc.? And then I create the space that I need. I protect my attention, and I begin that process before it's even perfect. And then I leave room for grace. Yes, I could be hard on myself sometimes, but hey, you gotta leave enough room for grace, because flow doesn't always arrive when you demand it. Sometimes it arrives when you are finally still enough, honest enough, and surrendered enough to stop controlling how it comes to you. The strongest anchor for point number 3 here is that preparation helps you become ready for what you say that you want. Surrender helps you receive what you could not have planned. You need both. So now, reflection questions for the listeners. I want you to ask yourself, where in my life am I trying to force ease? Where in my life am I calling something discipline when it's actually fear? What conditions help me feel more connected, find clarity, and tap into a creative flow? What would change if I trusted preparation more than pressure? In my opinion, the goal is not to chase flow state. Maybe the goal is to become someone that flow state can easily find. Someone who is present enough to notice when it arrives. Someone who is grounded enough to receive it. Someone who is disciplined enough to prepare for it. Someone who is courageous enough to use it. And of course, someone who is gracious enough to share their story. Now, if this episode helped you identify new ways to connect to your flow state, share it with someone else who is eager to find the answers within the same dilemma. And if you haven't, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. The next episode in this series of Flow State, we step fully into the difference between discipline and force. The next episode explores the line between healthy structure and self-pressure. How to identify when your ambitions become anxiety. I am your host. Till next time, Naum.